Hello buddy, it's Ben down here, and today I'm going to be talking about how I think that Fortnite Competitive should change. In this video, I'm going to be going over things that I would change to make competitive a better experience. And hopefully you guys agree with me, but if you do not, be sure to leave your own opinions and thoughts about this in the comment section after watching the video. But I do strongly believe that there's some things that Epic can do to improve the competitive experience. Before we get into the video though, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are brand new to the channel and you enjoy the content, and you can use my supported creator code BENDOMINATOR in the item shop, #ad. Thank you to everybody that uses that code. So, Fortnite Competitive is a tricky beast, and everybody has their own opinions on how Fortnite should work and how Fortnite should play. But I think a lot of people can agree with me when I say that Fortnite has never really been very balanced, and it's never really been made for competitive play in mind. See, competitive I feel like is kind of an afterthought in Fortnite, and I feel like there's so much that can be done to improve upon it. And I think as it is now, it is very unbalanced and a very frustrating experience for many. Of course, myself not being a competitive player, it can be hard for me to judge a lot of things based on this, but I feel like a lot of the stuff I'm going to say in this video can be applied and kind of easily understood by a lot of competitive players. But that kind of goes into one of my first points here, is that Fortnite needs a competitive player to tell them a lot of things. Me not being a competitive player, it's hard for me to judge everything, and I know for a fact that Epic Games doesn't have really any Fortnite competitive players on their team for competitive. If Fortnite actually hired some competitive players to kind of help balance out and make some changes to competitive, I feel like that would improve a lot of things. Because of course they have a lot of insight that people like me or employees at Epic Games might not have. But for the stuff that I do have insight on, these are some changes that I would like to see made. So the very main thing is the loot pool. I feel like the competitive loot pool needs to be different from the normal BR loot pool. It doesn't make any sense to me that BR and competitive would share the same exact loot pool, minus a few changes here and there. Instead of just getting rid of some weapons and stuff, I feel like the competitive loot pool needs to be completely overhauled and different. I'd say stick to some of the main classic guns that a lot of people are familiar with. Things like the pump, the tac, the normal AR, the bolt action, stuff like that. Make it a bit more classic feeling, but don't add any too many wacky items in there. I don't think competitive players would really appreciate a bunch of random item like stink bombs and bows. I think a lot of competitive players would rather be set in a scene that they're more familiar with, something that's simpler and easier to understand. They don't want to see a bunch of unbalanced items around. Even though that's really fun for casual play, competitive play is completely different. They need to make it as balanced as possible. But another thing to understand is that Fortnite will never be completely balanced no matter how you put it. Things like building and bloom and all these different kinds of weapons alter the game way too much. RNG will always be a factor in Fortnite. But simplifying Fortnite to its core gameplay can make competitive a lot simpler and easier to understand, and I'm sure it would make it a lot less frustrating for many competitive players. I can see how it can be frustrating to go up against all these different weird mechanics, especially with this season. This season has introduced so many things like crafting, animals, wildlife, bows, all that kind of cool stuff that's amazing for casual play, but for competitive it pretty much ruins it all. I see a lot of competitive players complaining about the season on Twitter, and I honestly kind of understand where they're coming from. When competitive is pretty much the same as BR, it can be very frustrating. There needs to be differences between the two. BR can have as many wacky, fun, and interesting mechanics as it wants to. In fact, I hope that BR continues to go in this direction. But for competitive, they really do need a simplified, less annoying and frustrating version of the game. They need something that isn't a bunch of random items and mechanics being introduced all the time. Something simpler and something easier to grasp. And not because competitive players necessarily need an easier experience, but because they need a more balanced experience. And making things simpler and removing a lot of the fluff and a lot of the more wacky, crazy items and mechanics could balance the game a little bit more and just make it more competitive friendly. Especially if you keep it this way, it's going to actually improve another big factor of the game, which is the ever-changing meta. Of course, the meta always being different and changing all the time is great for casual play. It keeps things really interesting and it makes players engaged a lot longer. But for competitive play, when the meta is changing all the time, it can be hard to keep up. Which is why I think that keeping the loot pool consistent and concise can really improve competitive. It could help keep competitive very familiar to all competitive players. And that's not to say that I don't think the loot pool should change at all, but I just think that if they do make changes, it should be minor changes. Things shouldn't be changing as frequently as they do in BR, because with competitive, people need to understand and get used to the meta, and it can be frustrating for competitive players to have the meta be changing every few months. But hey, that's kind of what I think about competitive. Of course, me not being a competitive player, it's kind of hard to speak on a lot of things. If you're a competitive player and you're watching this video, what do you think about what I talked about? Do you think that what I talked about is good, or do you not agree at all? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And even if you're not a competitive player, what do you guys think? Would you guys think competitive would be better if it was more consistent, with a more consistent and simpler loot pool? Or do you think it would make it worse? I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. If you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you're brand new to the channel. I make videos like this all the time, so if you guys want to see more stuff like this, you can subscribe. You can also use my supporter creator code, Ben Dominator, in the item shop, #ad, if you really want to support me. Thank you to everybody that uses that code. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.